Welcome to the Business of Wholesaling podcast. I'm your host, Drew Carroll, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Aaron Chapman, who promises not to make a boring episode. Aaron, how are you?
Well, now that you say it, it might be the first time I do that.
This is it. I've cursed you.
This all lands on you, Drew. It could become boring, not because of me. Let's put it that way.
All right. For the record is now straight.
What's happening, man?
Who are you and what do you do, man?
So it's a good question. Who am I? That's people keep asking that, and then everybody defines themselves by what they do every day. I get up in the morning and do certain things, and I have this routine, and I end up talking to real estate investors to help them finance investment in real estate. And as a result of that, that kind of, in many people's minds, defines who I am. But in reality, who Aaron Chapman is I'm a student of what it takes to make it through this crap. And every time I think I got it figured out, it changes. So I'm a people collector and a student, if you really want to get down to it. I believe that we leave this earth with two things: relationships and experience. I'm not going to leave with several $100 million. I'm going to leave with the people I spent time with and whether or not we enjoyed that time, and do I get to take that on to the next realm.
That's awesome. And I think more people should spend more time trying to find who they are, because it is a loaded question, right? And like you said, most people define it by what they do for a living or how they make money, instead of defining it by what they do as a father or what they do, as a husband. That's super interesting. I like that.
And as a husband and father, what's very, 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 very interesting about being a father is I didn't realize what it was to be a father till I became a grandfather. It changed my entire perspective, because you're looking at it from the outside in now. It changes everything. And then you get to see the nature of my son-in-law, right? So I'm blessed to have my daughter and my son-in-law live next door, and I have two grandkids next door. I have an 18-year-old that lives in the house. She's in her senior year. And I have two other children that are married, living in Missouri. And we have houses in different parts of the country within our family trust that I had set up, because we never had one like that before. And everybody lives in a house owned by the trust, and we all lease from the trust. And So, and then I've got my third kid. She's 12 months, she's 12 to 13 weeks in on a pregnancy. I got a third grandkid coming. And, you start to see how your kids are bringing other kids into the world and how they are with them. And that's when you see the nature, or see what you are like as a father, is that how they hand off the traits and things that they had learned, and how they start raising up your grandkids. And let me just tell you, man, I am a very, 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 very happy father and grandfather, especially watching, because we get the blessing of being able to watch our two grandkids for 2 days every other week, because my daughter works for the fire department. So she's on shift at the firehouse for 48-hour shifts. My son-in-law works as a mechanic for Volvo. So he works those 12-hour days. We get the kids during the day until he comes home from work and takes them for the evening. And what's awesome is when he walks into the house to pick them up, and you see the faces of your grandkids light up because daddy's there. You get to know the type of person that he is just by how his children respond to him, and you know that your daughter made a good choice.
That's so interesting. I spend a lot of time. I'm a new father. Like, I have a 4-year-old, and that's
congratulations, and I feel your pain.
Thank you. I spent a lot of time reading Ryan Holiday, especially he has a book called The Daily Dad. It's based around his daily stoic kind of thing. And a lot of it, like the whole first third of the book, is basically just reiterating the message that it does not matter what you say as a parent. It only matters what you do. And you will not know how successful you are until your children grow up and you watch then what they are doing, because what they are doing is what you did when they were modeling you as a parent. So it's so interesting. And you just briefly touched on that in the first minute of this conversation, was just you got your first piece of feedback, right? Like, you now get to see your son be a father, and you get to see what traits you actually instilled in him. And it's not just lip service, like, oh yeah, dad, I know to be trustworthy. Well, it's one thing to say, but show me, prove it to me. And now you get to see their kids respond to them and what they're learning.
And it's a long time to wait for feedback, man. And what's interesting is I don't give a damn how good you are as a father. You're always going to carry regret. You're always going to have those things that you wish you did, things that you wish you had thought of, things that you see somebody else did that was way past that time in life. And, I had opportunities probably about a month and a half ago. I went hunting up in northern Arizona, and and I'm traveling across places that I traveled across with my kids, taking them hunting when they were younger. And I was going solo. I was up there with some other guys. I didn't have any of my kids with me. And you had those quiet moments when you're alone because you have to wait during the day, get settled in before the deer come into a certain area. You don't want to spook anything, and you're reflecting on all these things. And you get that bit of loneliness in the sense that they're gone. The moments that you had there are gone. You will never have them again. And you as a new father with a 4-year-old, and you've got the whole world in front of you, his whole world in front of you. He will see the world through your eyes, and you'll see the world through his. And there will be moments that you're going to see something really freaking awesome, and you're going to thank God that you got to see it. But then you're going to lament the fact that it's gone. So store that in your brain the best that you possibly can, because if anything, you get to come back to it. And you get to come back to it with him. So I got to then reminisce those moments with my daughter when I got back home. She was hanging out with her boyfriend, and they're at the house, and we're having dinner together. And I shared with her, what was happening while I was hunting, and we talked about the story when I first took her hunting. It was a really, really fun time, and she was like 9 years old. I think it was 8 or 9 years old. We're driving down the I-40 in northern Arizona, heading towards Seligman, Arizona. And all of you know, familiar with Seligman, but that was the pattern. That town was the pattern for Radiator Springs in the movie Cars.
Interesting. Cool.
We're driving on the I-40. I'm like, hey, Maggie, and it's dark outside. We're on our way to camp. My buddy's already there with his kid and whatever. And we're still probably another 45 minutes away, an hour away. I'm like, and she's starting to doze off. Hey, you remember in Cars where the truck falls asleep? She goes, yeah. I said, that's right here on the road. She goes, really? And I'm like, see those lights out there? That's Radiator Springs. She goes, well, slow down. We go by there. I'll take pictures. I'm like, no, we're going to drive through it because we had to go through it anyway. So I took her through there. All the cars are there except for the Judge, the Hudson Hornet, and the lowriders. They're the only ones that are not there. Everything else is there. And the Porsche, I think. So we're driving through and she's taking pictures. And the next morning when we get up and we're out on our spot hunting and we're glassing for deer across all these areas, she's underneath my parka, my jacket, with my tablet watching Cars. And it was such a cool moment. And then I get to thinking, so that moment's gone. I'll never have it. But now I get to make more moments with her and reflect on the moments we had. So don't, it's going to be hard not to regret a lot of things. It's going to hurt not to lament the lost moments, but just take inventory of the ones you have and reminisce a lot with them and be prepared to make more of them.
It speaks so much to like the power of being present, right? And of presence. And, a lot of people talk about like goals and being goal oriented. Like, I feel like this is a lesson we can take from family, right? Which is like, what is the goal of family, right? There's no goal. There's no endpoint. We have tons of aspirations, right? We there are values we want to aspire to. There are things we want to do. But at the end of the day, relationships is literally about being in that moment and just truly absorbing it and enjoying it. Like you're saying, like that moment's going to be gone soon. So you need to be like 100% focused and present during that moment to appreciate every ounce of it. Because when it's gone, it's gone. And I think that people miss that lesson in business as well, because business isn't goal. Like you don't do business for an endpoint, right? You do business as something to do. Like you are relating with your business. You are in a relationship with your business. And I think people miss the just relishing every moment, good and bad, just like we do with our kids, where it's like, this is a moment. This is a pivotal moment. Things are never going to be different from this moment on. And I think that like there's so many parallels there, and that really is the key to just enjoying what you do. Is to enjoy it and look at it the same as if you're parenting a child.
True. And as a person who finances and invests in real estate, so helping investors understand the value of the leverage and what really makes a good investment. And it's not, and I know that it's always been for at least as long as I've been in it, and especially working with real estate investors, the main focus has been cash on cash return and cap rates and all these things. And I get all that. Those are great metrics, but not albeit the entire metric that a person needs to be looking at. And there's also a lot of great opportunity lost because they're so focused on those metrics over anything else. And what it gives me the opportunity to do is develop a new relationship and help them understand other things. Doesn't mean that they're going to do exactly what I say or that I have the 100% foolproof thought process. But what it means, it gives them more to think on, potentially greater opportunity to be successful than what they would have had with a narrow vision. And now we build on, what I said was originally, like I'm a student and a people collector. I've collected another person. There's another individual that's part of my life. And, the only thing we leave this world with, and I may have said it on here already, is relationships and experience. You can't have one without the other, in my opinion. Sure, there's certain experiences, but how great is an experience that you didn't have with somebody else? And, there's a reason why there's a saying, it's like, well, you had to be there. Well, it sucks to have to use that as a saying. How about just have people there? And
Yeah.
when you're in a business that you can interact with people who have the same philosophies as you, or you all come together for a similar goal and similar outcomes to change people's lives, and their lives are changing. And at the same time, mine's changing. As they're becoming successful, I become more successful. It's this thing of that whole rising tide raises all boats. Business has been evolved into battlefield type of thinking for most people. It's there's got to be a winner and a loser. There doesn't have to be. Everybody can win, but unfortunately, some people treat it like war. And war, the only winner is the person who can stand the most devastation and still be standing. Everybody loses. Everybody takes a beating. Everybody has resources expended for no real value. And so when you look at it from the right angle, I think that business is a huge relationships driver, huge relationship builder, huge experience builder, and gives you things to take with you. And it isn't going to be the money you made from your business.
How did you get to this point in your life? Like a lot of people can look and hear somebody like you speak and think that it's incredibly inspiring, but a lot of people are in the back of their heads going, well, it's easy for Aaron. I'm sure he's super successful. And that's why he's focused on relationships and not like I'm focused on rent this month. How do you address that type of mindset with new entrepreneurs? Because 90% of us are trapped there.
Well, I think we're all focused on something monetarily right now. It doesn't matter. Even the guys with the biggest and baddest bank accounts, they got some big nut somewhere they got to crack that they got to worry about. And Aaron Chapman has no less worries in life, right? I got business relationships, business commitments everywhere that, it doesn't take much for that to negatively affect you significantly if one of those things goes bad. And so you do the best you can, distribute your what you're investing into multiple different things and pray for the best and work your ass off like it all depends upon you and pray like it all depends on God. But I've come to these conclusions after, I just turned 50, 5 days ago. So you start to get to the understanding of your mortality as you get further in life. And my mortality has been tested a lot. When I got in the industry in 1997. Prior to that, you go all the way back to high school. Man, we had a cattle ranch when I was growing up. Spent 6 years there, running 500 head of cattle every year ish, somewhere in that range. It was all beef cattle. You learn a lot from there. And then I was in a rural town in central Utah, and I engineered a C so I could graduate. I was not a good student, but I was really good at picking locks. So I figured out where they kept tests, answer keys, and I was able to engineer getting that data and distributing that data for business and for homework and make those trades. And so I engineered a C so I can get out of high school halfway through my senior year and went to work for for a welding company in the oil fields of Wyoming. From there, went to running heavy equipment, driving truck. Then I ended up in the mines of northern New Mexico, which to me was the greatest job I'd ever had. You're several hundred feet underground. You're drilling into the rock. You load it with explosives, blow it, step around the corner, blow it up, dig it out, support the ground, do it again. You just drive and tunnel. It's amazing. But like everything, things have a shelf life, and that mine had a shelf life. And when we reached it, they laid us all off. I came back to Arizona. I had a wife and infant son here while I was going back and forth 10-hour drives for 13 shifts at a run. And I had to go find a job. I thought, this is not going to be hard. I got this massive resume.
Right.
But that ended up being what made it difficult to find a job. I kept being told I was overqualified, to the extent that we had nothing left. There was no money in the bank account. I was overdrawn, and we needed diapers, and I needed a job. So I drove to a place to apply for a $10 an hour truck driving job to haul landscape rock. Period. There's no way they can turn me down for this. This is the gimme that I didn't want to have to take. And yet I got turned down again, saying that I was overqualified. And I finally asked this guy, what the hell does that mean? I'm either qualified or I'm not. He said, it means that you have enough capability that you can take any job and leave us flapping the breeze. I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to train somebody just to have you leave. I'm like, okay, thank you for at least defining it, but it didn't make it any better. So as I'm leaving there to go to a grocery store with a coupon for free diapers that my wife found in the paper, I drove over to the grocery store. On my way, my gas light comes on my truck. And I had not driven that truck very far on the gas light. So I pulled up to a fuel pump, ran my debit card, and I got a decline. So then as I rifled through my truck looking for some change, I found a few coins, and I locked the door, started walking the parking lot for what felt like a couple of hours. I'm just going off of memory here. And I don't know, it's one thing to see a quarter or $1 and pick that up like, cool, man, I found me $1. It's another thing to be looking around cautiously to make sure nobody sees you picking up a penny or a nickel or a dime or anything you can find. It took me a while to find enough to get 2 gallons of gas. Then I went into the grocery store, found my diapers with my head down, paid for those with a coupon, and I'm trying to get out. And I heard my name called by somebody walking into the store. It happened to be a guy that ran one of the offices where I used to run heavy equipment digging swimming pools. He asked me how things were. I really glazed over it with him. And he asked if I wanted to go to dinner. I'm like, dude, I can't afford dinner. He goes, no, I've got a gift certificate. I'll take you to Red Lobster. So he took me and my wife to Red Lobster, and we got to really talk about how things were. And he introduced me to the mortgage industry by giving me the business card to a broker, the branch manager of a broker shop. So I cut a foot off of my hair. I shaved. My mom bought me some business-like clothes, and I went in there in December of '97 and applied and became a telemarketer first. And I had to, earn my chops as a telemarketer in the industry.
And what about, like, was it at that dinner where it was like, this is all I have type of thing that inspired you to go and take that job? Or was there something about what your friend was telling you in that job that inspired you? Like, did it seem different than all the trade? Because you went from trades to a call center. Like, that's a pretty big jump.
That was a massive jump and a miserable jump. And no, there was nothing enticing about it other than I had nothing else. My back was against a wall. I had no place else to go. And so if it wasn't for that, there's no way I've ever taken that job or had someplace else I could have gone. Right. But luckily, after I accepted that job, I got a job to drive truck over the road, and I'd haul to Sacramento, freight to Sacramento back every week. And that was miserable. I hated that. But it kept me in income while I was trying to build this up. And then I went back to an opportunity popped up where I was able to run heavy equipment. So I get up at 3 a.m., be at the yard by 4, be done by noon, be at the office by 2. By that time, I had a feeling for it, and I worked. And then I was actually doing the loans. I wasn't telemarketing anymore. So by that time, I would work from 10 p.m. Work until 10 p.m. So from like 2 till 10 p.m. and then sleep 4 hours a night. And I did that for a year till the rates dropped below 7%, and it started to take off for me in late 1998. And then, of course, you go on to build your business up. Things were working. I replaced my income. I was able to make it a living of it. It wasn't a great living, but I did all right. Started making 6 figures. Then I started getting really decent 6 figures by 2004, 5, 6, and 7. And then 2008 comes along, right? So I was still doing okay, 8 deals a month, something like that. It was enough to really pay a decent income. And I was heading out of town because I was doing 2 things at once, sleeping 4 hours a night again. I decided to jump on Harley and head out of town for 3 days, just get my head clear. So it was August 8th of 2008. 8's always been my lucky number. Like, this is a great time to go. So I was going to ride for 3 days. 15 minutes into that ride, I was doing 80 plus miles an hour, and a kid in his dad's truck put me into another car. And I went flipping down the freeway at 12:24 in the afternoon in August in Arizona. So have you ever been down here in August? It's not an awesome time to lay down on blacktop.
You're frying in a frying pan.
Exactly. You could literally cook things on that blacktop. So it's 200 plus degrees on the blacktop. Not only that, but I shattered my legs, busted a lot of stuff up. And so I woke up that night around midnight, hazy, looking around, trying to get a feel for what was happening. And there was a shadowy figure off to my right, and I'm asking where I am. From what it sounds like was like the 100th time that day, I got this exasperated response. You've been in an accident, and give me the breakdown on where I am by my wife. I started to recognize the voice. And then I was realizing I'm going to be confined to a wheelchair. I also had a head injury that was enough, because I was wearing a helmet, but it cracked the helmet. I hit hard enough that it cracked that. And my memory would recycle every 3 to 4 minutes. So then I'd asking people, what am I doing? Where am I at? And I was hallucinating. It was a crazy time, but I had to come back from that. I went into the hospital with a net worth about $3.5 million at 190 pounds, rock climber, marathoner, mountain biker, that kind of thing. I wheeled out at 156 pounds with a negative net worth of 1.5 million. So massive swing in value personally. And then, of course, a memory that I had to train, because my memory would recycle every 3 to 4 minutes. So when I got back into the industry, it was getting better, but I still had to carry a notepad for everything that was going on. And I had 2 realtors that would send me business. One, her name was Carolyn with Caldwell Banker, and then my mother. And they would call me up and say, hey, here's a client. Call me back 5 minutes later, say, hey, did you write that down? Like, write what down? Get your pen, get your pad. They're very patient with me. And then I'd call the client, and I'd take notes and scratch off that they were called. Now and again, I pick up my pad. I'm like, oh, I hadn't called this person. So I call them up and start talking, and they're like, We just spoke. I'm like, what did we say? Because I didn't take notes, and here's what's going on. I just had to explain to them the biggest transaction in your life is managed by a guy whose minute memory is 3 to 5 minutes. Right. So crawling back from that, you learn a few things about you, and you start to remember some of the interesting things that happens in your life. So I was so dang busy before that accident. I was so focused on building a business and being somewhere in that, I forgot about the people I had at home. So then I got to learn about these people at home because I was around them all the time. Right? I'm in a damn wheelchair. I could do very little by myself. There was still a lot I insisted on doing on my own. I wasn't going to be completely taken care of, but I got to spend a lot of time with them. And when you start to develop those kind of relationships and then you see things happen, I mean, we talked before about you see something happen with your kid and then it's gone. And that was my first taste of that. When I saw my youngest, Maggie, jump up on the bed and did something really funny and she disappeared. And then it hit me. The emotion came with it. That's gone. That moment will never happen again. And if I was not here in this condition, under these circumstances, I wouldn't have seen it at all. And then you got to realize the blessings of relationship and that circumstances will allow you relationships that you may not have had before. And I have a good friend of mine that likes to say, no matter what the conditions are, if the opportunity is there, take the meeting. Because sometimes you can rationalize that the meeting's not worthwhile, or, oh, I'm not going to get anything from this, or this Drew guy, I don't know him very well. Why am I going to spend 45 minutes on this podcast? But what we get out of it could be the next thing that propels us. And so take the meeting, especially when it comes to building a relationship.
Right. Yeah. Even what a brilliant way to say it. Like I've been through the same thing, not having like had a huge network swing and not having memory or anything like that. But yeah, it always just boils down to that. People go through hard times, right? We go through hard times personally. We go through hard times in business. We go through hard times. And what makes, somebody successful isn't somebody who avoids them. It's somebody who is able to deal with them. And your resolve is admirable as how far you've gotten. So where did you go from there? So you're in a wheelchair, you're rebuilding your business, and now what?
So I went back to the business. So I was working for Countrywide when I got in the accident. Well, then Bank of America bought Countrywide during the whole window. So then you go back to work for Bank of America. And sorry, Bank of America, but working for you is like serving time for some shit I didn't do. That was not the way Aaron Chapman is, and the way they do their business is not cohesive whatsoever. So I left there, went to another company that had a banking background, but they were more of a mortgage company. It was a great company at the time. And I had taken, there was deals that started to come in when I got there. I got a call from a friend at Bank of America, said, hey, can you do this kind of deal? And I said, yes, I can. Happen to have one of those right now. 2 of these types is called an FHA flip, meaning if you're buying a house from somebody using an FHA loan, they need to own that home for at least 90 days before they can sell it to you. Well, these guys were selling them those homes and they owned them less than 90 days because they're buying them, rehabbing them, flipping them. You could do that deal, but Bank of America didn't want to, but this company would. So I took those on. And I had 2 of them. It was the exact same seller on both of them. I called them up, say, hey, I got these 2 deals of yours. They're like, can you do an FHA flip? I'm like, yes, I can. They say, every lender says they can, and then they can't. We'll be prepared for you to screw it up like everybody else, and we'll rewrite the contract in 91 days. I closed it in less than 30 days. So they called me and said, you need to come meet with our CEO. So I came met with our CEO and said, what can we do to ensure that every single person we do business with talks to you? I'm like, whatever you want. I'm like, I'm not going to argue with you. Yeah. And that's where it started, that real estate investors started coming into Arizona at the time and started buying from them. So then I started working with the real estate investors, and that started just jump my business up. Now, not a lot of people wanted to compete with me on that because the average purchase price was about $60,000. So 60 to 70 grand, that's not a lot of loan amount. People want $200,000 and $300,000 loan amounts, not 40 and 50,000. So I had a lot of deals, but man, they were little commissions. Just as much work. I would put just as much work, if not more, into those little deals than what you would for $1 million transaction. $1 million deal would pay somebody like $8,000, $9,000 in revenue, where my little $50,000 deal was paying me like $400. And I'm doing just as much work. But I got a relationship out of it. And that person went and bought something in Indiana, then Texas, then Tennessee, then Missouri. Next thing you know, I have this national business that's growing. And at my peak, I was doing 1,500 transactions a year.
Jeez.
Right now, we'll do between 500 and 600 this year. And that's a lot given our current market. That's a significant amount. And I'm blessed to be able to do that. Is it painful? Yeah, it is, because we need more than that to do more than just turn the lights on predictably. But by the grace of God, do I have that?
Yeah. So you found this like perfect little niche with the investors, being able to do what other lenders couldn't do. That's so interesting. So what is it you do now? Like what is it you do for investors in this current time? Because everybody's being kind of sold something different, right? Like, oh, you can't get money from the bank right now. Hard cash is too expensive. So just sub two or don't even bother. It's kind of what's going on right now. So what do you have to say to everybody who's looking for capital?
For the most part, it's helping people really calculate what is a deal. Because when you're talking about your regular real estate investor, they're going to look at, especially over the last few years, going to say it has to have a certain cash on cash return or cap rate, right? That's where their focus is. What's your cash flow? Now, I get that. Cash flow is a big deal, but they fail to calculate the true value of being able to leverage something and understand it. So we're going to do some math together. You cool with that?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're going to take an average deal right now. Let's say it's a $200,000 house that you're going to buy and you're going to try and rent it out. So you're going to buy a $200,000 house. If you're going to leverage it the conventional way, or even what they call the debt service coverage ratio kind of way, you're going to put 20% down. And you're going to say rent it out for $1,800 a month, which is less than the 1% rent to value ratio. A lot of people are like, well, I'm not getting my 1%. Well, it's going to be less than 1%. We're $1,800. And let's say you're only making $100 a month cash flow with your 30-year fixed mortgage and your appreciation. We're just going to beat your appreciation up to 2.5%. Right? Does that sound like a deal that would get you excited as a real estate investor?
Sure.
Okay, good. I'm glad that you think that way, because most people think I'm only making $100 a month cash flow on a $200,000 asset, and it's only less than 1% rent to value ratio. That does not seem like something I should get. So I like to do the math with folks, because it sounds like you've got a little bit of different mindset. So we're going to break this down. So you're going to take a $200,000 purchase price. You're putting 20% down. How much money is that?
$40K.
40,000. And let's say, and this is, again, we're going very conservative, guys. This is not what it is when you call most of your lenders, especially myself. Let's say between lender fees, title fees, appraisal, taxes, insurance, all those things, you're spending another 10 grand, right? Mm-hmm. So now you're investing how much out of your pocket? 50K. How much is the loan amount if it's 80% of 200,000?
80% of 200, 160.
160. So you have a $160,000 mortgage. Now, your job as the real estate investor is to pick up property and keep it reasonably rented the entire time you own it. You're able to raise rents on it. You get some appreciation. If you did that right, who pays off the $160,000 loan?
My renter.
Your renter. So the money's going to filter from your renter or a series of renters over 30 years into you, and then you're going to pay the mortgage. So take $160,000, this is where you get your calculator out, and divide it by 30 and tell me how much every single year your renter is giving you in paying off that loan. So 160,000 divided by 30. And I know, guys, there's an amortization table. I know the first 5 years is pretty front loaded with interest, but we're talking about an average over 30 years. That's how we're building this business. So what's 160 divided by 30?
5,333.
So $5,333.34. That's how much you're getting from your tenant to pay off your mortgage, basically. So what percentage of your $50,000 you invested is $5,333?
10%-ish.
10.6 to be precise.
Okay.
So that means your investment of $50,000 is growing by 10.6% because somebody else is paying off the leverage, correct?
Right.
Any argument?
No.
So that's what we get. Average over 30 years, making 10.6 on your money right there. Now, we live in an inflationary environment, right? And because of inflation, houses are going up in value, and because there's a limit on how many houses are available. And also, there's, the buyers right now, they are buying fairly quickly, but they're not buying as quickly as they should, because we're right now waiting to see who's going to end up getting elected, which is a dumb reason to wait, but it is what people are doing. Case Shiller, Black Knight, CoreLogic, they're claiming about 6 to 6.5% in appreciation. We're going to knock that all the way down to 2.5. What's 2.5% of 200,000?
200.
Seems more complicated than it is. You're going to be surprised when you get the number. You'll be like, duh.
I can't do it. 2.5%. Nope, I can't do it.
So 2.5% of 100,000 is $2,500, right? Well, if it's 200, you double $5,000. It's only $5,000. What percentage of your 50,000 is $5,000?
10.
Right? You add that to the 10.6, what do you have?
20.6.
You're making 20.6% on your investment by having somebody else in there paying off the mortgage, not even making a single dollar of cash flow. and having the house appreciate a minimum of 2.5% annually. And then it compounds, right? So that's 2.5% of 205,000 next year, right? 2.5% of the next 8,000 or whatever that might be. You can see how that compounds, right?
Yeah.
It gets huge. Now let's get into the cash flow piece. We're talking about that $100 a month cash flow. Nothing sexy. Nobody's excited about that. No. Rents are going up between 6 to 6.5% nationally. Some places more, some places less. But let's cut that down in half. Let's say 3%. What's 3% of $1,800? That's going to be a tougher math. I'll just throw it out there. I do this presentation all over the planet. It's $54. Mm-hmm. Are you excited about being able to raise your rent by $54 the next year?
Not at all.
No, that's not a big number. But what's also really cool about that is the tenant's not excited about it. Well, actually, they kind of do get excited because your tenant's brother-in-law, who's kind of a prick, is renting a 2-bedroom apartment. His went up by $120. He can't wait to go to get in and pound his chest and say, "One of my landlord Drew did. He only raised mine by $54. I'm in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. You're in a 2-bedroom apartment. You went up $120, right?" So, give that person, they kind of feel like they're getting somewhere, and they're not going to be apt to move out on you so quick. They're going to kind of take care of you. So you're getting a $54 increase. But what percentage of your $100 is $54?
54%.
54%. You're getting double-digit compound increase in your cash flow. Look what year 3, 4, and 5 is going to do for you. Now you're seeing some real big cash flow starting to come, and your tenant's still in there. Now, this is where it starts to get extremely sexy. Does the lender get to raise the payment on the loan because of inflation?
No.
It's the same. Outside of taxes and insurance, you're going to pay the exact same dollar amount for principal and interest. Now, here's what's very, very interesting. Most folks really get caught up on. On a $160,000 mortgage at today's interest rates, you're going to pay $402,000 in principal and interest. People get freaked out about that. It's like, that's why David Ramsey and Susie Orman and my grandpa and my pop says you need to pay extra on that, pay this mortgage off so you don't have to pay this interest. But what they fail to really think about is what's the value of the dollar doing over 30 years?
Yeah.
Let's go backwards 30 years ago. 30 years ago in 1994, I was in Moses Lake, Washington. I walked into my very first Taco Bell ever. I bought 2 crunchy tacos, 2 bean burritos, and a drink off their value menu for $1.99.
Right.
Fast forward now, what is it to drive through a Taco Bell drive-through and buy those exact same damn things?
$20. 15 maybe.
It's 15. It's $15, $14.98 or whatever it is when you're done paying for it.
20 up here in Canada.
Yeah, so you probably have that percentage jump up just because of the Trudeau tax, right?
Yeah.
So $15, that's a 750% swing in the buying power of the dollar over 30 years.
Right.
Does burrito construction become that expensive?
No.
No, it's because of what we have in the value of the currency become worth that much less. So let's equate this a little bit differently. I have in my hand right here is an 1888 gold piece. So that right here, and I got somebody trying to call me on my Teams there, so forgive that. But 1888 gold piece. This was minted for $20.
Right.
So that $20, you could walk into a department store in the early 1900s and buy a hat, a suit, a tie, a shirt, a belt, a pair of socks, and a pair of shoes for $20. This $20 right here, I can't buy the damn socks I'm wearing.
Right. Yeah.
But what's interesting is I can buy all the things I just mentioned with an ounce of gold and then some. It's not that the gold has become more valuable, and it's not that all those clothes have become more expensive. It's that this has become worth that much less.
Right.
So when you recalculate handing the money to the bank, you're actually giving it back less than what you borrowed. So recalculating the dollar based upon inflation, you start to see that every time you give the bank that money, you literally give them a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less. You're raising your rents, double-digit increases to your cash flow as the bank's getting what seems like single-digit hits to their value, but over 30 years, you actually give them $152,000 to $154,000. You borrowed $160,000, you paid $402,000, but the value of that $402,000 over the 30 years is $152,000.
Let me make sure I have this perfectly clear. So what you're saying is in a payback on a loan where most people are concerned about you're paying so much interest up front and very little capital, what you're saying is that's not really a big issue when you think about it, because the actual dollars you're giving now are more valuable now than that actual dollar will be 30 years in the future due to inflation. So the actual $20 bill will be less valuable 30 years in the future than what it will be now. but your asset will be increasing, and at very minimum, obviously way more than that in this example, what you're charging for somebody to live in that asset is staying up with inflation and or increasing above inflation. So you're winning with this massive inflation delta, which is covering way more than what your interest is going to be on capital, and what looked like a break-even deal, which is what you started with, is really just like a cash cow if you look at it over time and actually do the numbers.
Over time, it's monster, especially when you start factoring. So we already figured you're at a 20% growth, and we haven't gotten done with all the total growth here. We're at 20%, 20.6. Then we figure out your bank is actually making less on the money because they're stretching it out over 30 years and accepting the same currency over and over and over again, right? So you're making that because you get to raise your rents because of inflation. They're stuck. That's why, have you ever noticed, I don't know if you guys ever paid attention to, or a lot of people really haven't, how often, and I know this because I'm in the industry and I've been doing it for so long, because refi booms come every 4 to 5 years. That's just the thing. The refi boom will come. It'll come. Well, why is that such a thing? When you look at a 30-year fixed mortgage, the first 5 years, what does it look like?
I don't know.
Say, if you guys have seen it, the amortization table looks like it's all interest up front.
Right.
You're not going to affect your balance hardly at all. Case in point, I had a guy with a $120,000 mortgage. He paid for 48 months. He paid nearly $38,000 in payments, but his balance only went down by like $6,200.
Jeez, it's so disheartening.
He refinanced the house and added the cost back onto the deal, which took him right within $102 of his original balance 48 months before, and reset him at just paying interest again. If he kept that practice going every 4 to 5 years for 20 years, he'll have paid almost $200,000 on that house and never affected the balance. That's how the banks win, making it seem like do this refinance, because they don't want you to hold it for 30 years. The mortgage is not worth holding for 30 years. They'll give you the big 30-year fixed blanket, but they got marketing engines, and they are good at understanding how to influence people to not follow through. My job as the sole screaming little tiny voice in this massive, vast area is to pay your damn mortgage and stick with it for the full 30 years. Instead of taking the extra capital to pay it off, take the extra capital and reinvest it, let it compound for you. Right. So I get deep into the infinite banking strategies and all these other things that we don't have time for this podcast. We're already getting to our 45 minutes. So we'll have to come back so I can get into the depth of how to look at interest rates and what's really happening with interest rates and where to put your money. But so here's some other parts we haven't talked about. In the US, you get to depreciate the structure. So let's say this $200,000 house that we're talking about has probably about $170,000 value on the structure. Well, you get to take that $170,000, you get to depreciate that on your taxes over the next however many years. That $170,000 divided by 27.5 years is another $6,100 a year in deduction. Right there, there's another, that could be another, depending upon your income, that could be another 10%, right? Plus you get to deduct the interest that your tenant's paying. That adds into it. When you really start stacking it up, you could be close to 30%, not counting your cash flow.
Right.
So think about how many people walk away from amazing opportunities because the cash on cash return is not there and their cap rate is not there or their rent to value ratio is not there. They walk away from what could be an amazing deal because you want a good, solid home that can keep easily rented the entire time you own it, and you can raise rents on it, and it's in a good area. You do that with scale, it becomes massive.
What are the traps here? Because I feel like, or things to watch out for. Because I feel like it sounds great, but I feel like there's got to be something where people are concerned about, or where you could get caught or overconfident.
Oh, there's tons of traps. There's huge traps. So let's talk about the biggest trap, in my opinion, is you're getting so focused on, let's say those two metrics we were talking about, cash on cash return, cap rate. Get really focused on that. You can find great cash on cash returns. You can find some that have amazing rent to value ratios, but where you got to go to get it, right? You're talking about a harsher neighborhood, someplace it's really hard to keep rented. I mean, you can get people to rent it. You can get good cash flow because you pay little for the house, but it rents high because rents are high. But it's a lot of turnover. It's also a hard neighborhood. People they kind of live a different way because of that particular demographic beats the house up a lot. You may make a lot of cash flow, but every time they move, every 1 to 2 years, you got to put it all back into fixing the house and make it habitable again. Right? Section 8 is a great place where people do really well. I heard people do awesome in Section 8, but you have to have that massive scale, because sometimes when you flip those, you got a lot of money to put back into it to make sure the Section 8 people are happy with that. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have some of that. You put that into your portfolio, but you got to be cautious where you're buying. The numbers, sometimes the numbers don't lie, but also the numbers are misleading because they're sucking you in. You're not looking at the practicality of how you got those numbers. The other thing is you're just buying in a neighborhood that just sucks that nobody wants to live in. Yeah, you could say, okay, look at this. By using Aaron's math, and I'm using the leverage here and leverage there, but if you can't get a renter, then none of it works. You're going to pay it all yourself. Now, doesn't mean you're not going to still win because you're paying it over time. You're not paying back what you even borrowed. Property's still going to go up in value. You still get the tax deduction, but you don't have somebody else paying the mortgage. You're eating the mortgage, right? So there's that. The other things that you can get hit with is you need to have a good team. Some people say, well, I'll call Aaron, I'll get a quote, and I'll call this guy, I'll call that guy, I'll call that guy. And it's like, in the end result, we're all the same. We're just loaning money. But there's this old saying, good judgment comes from experience, and experience comes from bad judgment. What may look like a good practical deal to you from you run it, just looking through your lens, there may be a way that what you're doing doesn't apply in a practical way. It looks great in theory, but practicality could get your ass hurt. I've gotten to see where thousands of people are making decisions in the real estate investment business, where thousands of people fail, where thousands of people succeed. Your strategy may sound great on paper, but then I'm like, hey, I actually had this client and this client and this client and that client do the exact same thing, and this was their outcome. Like, oh, wow, I don't want that to happen. It's like, yes, you don't. So even though you can go to the internet and find somebody that's going to charge a rate that's maybe an 8 or 1/4% lower, you're going to put yourself into potentially a bad spot that will cost you tens of thousands of dollars over the long haul if you got the wrong people. The other is you might find a property manager says, hey, we'll do it for 6% instead of 8%. But they don't give a damn about getting the right tenant in there. They just want to get a tenant in there. They're not taking the time to really sift through it and get the best tenant. You want people to have a great big database with the right people to bring in.
Do you work with that as well, like getting tenants and property management?
I work with property managers. I don't do any of that. I don't have the patience for it. I am not cut to do that kind of crap. Two different things. Just dealing with tenants and when they call and all the craziness. I have a couple of tenants and they're great people, but man, they still have needs. The other thing is man, when I was managing myself, I accepted stories more often than I accepted a check. And that's not a good way to live either, because eventually you got to kick those people out. And if they're a great tenant and you take care of it and you guys all have a good understanding, I'm great with that. They text me when there's a problem. I'm cool with that. They're good people. They got a small family. I want to take care of them, but they also want to take care of me. But if there's somebody trying to win on either side, nobody's going to win.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's so interesting, because I can see where people can like look at this, and then the biggest missing piece is the tenant. And I feel, I was just at a mastermind in Boston with a bunch of great guys in Tampa with you afterwards. And that was the biggest concern, was like they have finances figured out, but right now they can't, like vacancies are their biggest issue. And so it's like, what do we do? How do we solve that? Yes, having a really good price on capital and whatnot is going to help with that if you do have to float it for a couple of months. But I really liked your example where it's just like, yeah, you're right, it might be less than 1%, but you're in such a good place that you're going to hold on to that renter, and the $50 increments, which look really great on you, your $100 cash flow is keeping them happy, which is so interesting versus the other like beat up areas like you were just mentioning, where you might be getting 2% on rent, but you have 4 months a year of vacancy, you have a disaster of a property that you're always fixing up. Like that was interesting. You're the first person I've ever talked to that distinguishes those two different things.
Well, and the reason that, because I've been working with so many people for so long, yeah, I get to see the end result, right? So a lot of times the data that you get is from the people selling the real estate. We don't have a lot of data from the people buying the real estate and what their experience is over time. I get to see that experience over time. Now, sure, you want to have a few of those mixed in there because they're great cash cows, but man, I've dealt with it. I had one in a rough part of Alabama, and it was, man, if I didn't spout off and say something stupid, I would never bought the damn house. But I made a comment, and I always live up to my comments. And so I had to ride through that whole thing. And we finally sold it just in the last few months. We actually still made money on it, still did well, but it was a pain in the ass the whole damn time.
Yeah. It's like what you're saying too, like right how we started this whole conversation, right? Like the feedback cycle on our children is incredibly long. But it's how we put things in at the beginning and how we structured our family life and our home and things like that is what makes them who they become. It's the same. You've just had so many more experiences, and although can be a long cycle for investors owning these properties, you've just seen it so many times. You've seen the cycle. You've got the feedback. Like, you get it. You see what's a good deal and what's not a good deal. And to your original point, experiences are really what matter. So yeah, that's incredible. I would love. We're getting close to the end of time, but I want to bring it back on to do, because I definitely want to talk about the infinite banking system. I also think, based off this podcast, we'll send it out to the list and see who has any questions. And if we get a big, because I'm really interested in this. So if we get a big amount of questions back, how do you feel about doing this live next time? And we could bring a few people on.
Live recording, stage, you name it. I'm fine with any of it. I think, because the thing is, it's such a big deal to me. We live in an environment where people don't know what the future is, completely uncertain. Everybody's trying to figure out, what do I got to do to protect what's mine and protect what's going to be the next generation. Everybody thinks that they have to live life leaner so they can leave something for the next generation. Like, you can live the life that you have, as they will still possibly, like my kids, I can spend every damn dime I got in front of me, and they'll be wealthier than I am when I leave this earth because of how I've set that up. And it takes a lot to really help them understand it too, and get them to be on board and participate and have the family meetings and know that it feels like they're being watched and they're being overseen, but it's because you're trying to make sure that they have what you're intending to do, because they've got to pass it on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. And I'm hell bent on making sure this is a possibility, not just for us, but for everybody I talk to. There's that. And there's also understanding what drives interest rates. People are so disappointed in the Fed lower rates, but rates didn't go down. Well, there's a reason being. I've got all the data on that. I've got the charts. I could have gotten into that, but that's another hour conversation.
Let's wrap here, and then let's talk logistics after this. But Aaron, this has been phenomenal. We're definitely going to figure out a round 2 and maybe a longer form so that we can get all of this information out. But thank you so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate your time today.